Hi guys, welcome back. Now before I start with this video, I want you all to know that in the previous video I discussed that I mentioned that in my next video I will be doing the graphs of the profit and losses, that is the area, shading the area of the profits and losses by drawing the cost curves as well. But now I've changed my mind since I will have to cover them again, those same graphs again in either ways in market structures. So in order to avoid the duplication, I'll be covering those in detail in market structures only. Right. Also, before I proceed with this video, I want you all to know that this is going to be our last video on theory of supply chapter, and now all the videos that will come from here onwards will be on market structures. Now guys, basically in this video we are going to consider about the decisions to continue business or closing the business, shutting down the business, because we will consider that when actually does a firm decides that it has to shut down, or basically what is the shutdown point if the firm is, let's say, facing a loss. Firms will decide whether to shut down when they are obviously facing a loss, that is the economic loss. So we will discuss in this video the theoretical aspect or the conceptual aspect of shutdown, and then this concept will be revisited again in market structures chapter along with the diagrams for shutdown and shutdown point as well, right? So this video will cover the theoretical aspects of it. You'll understand the theory, and then in market structures we'll see the diagrams. Now over here you can see that there are 5 firms, firm A, B, C and D respectively, and firstly we are assuming that they are operating in a perfectly competitive market. So we can see that firm A and firm B is making an abnormal and a normal profit. Firm A is making an abnormal profit of $1,000 while firm B is just making a normal profit. Over here I must also tell you that all profits and losses over here are economic profits and economic losses, which means that implicit cost is considered here. It's already embedded in your total cost. Okay, so we have firm A making an abnormal profit and firm B making a normal profit. So in this case, as far as firm A and B are concerned, they should continue operating in the short run. They should not close down. There's no point in closing down. They're making an abnormal, both are making economic profits. One is making supernormal abnormal profit while the other is economically breaking even, which is zero economic profit. That is firm B, right? Also we know that abnormal profit occurs when the total revenue is more than total cost, right? So firms make abnormal profit. So, and as far as, and when total revenue exceeds the total cost, assuming, as I already said, we are assuming all costs here are economic cost, which is including the implicit cost as well. So that's already assumed it's there. Okay. So, as far as abnormal profit is concerned, it happens when your price is more than your average total cost. When you're saying total revenue is more than total cost, we're talking about the totals, right? But as far as if you compare the price with the average total cost means cost per unit. So let's say if the selling price is $5, since we know that in a perfectly competitive market, P equals to MR equals to AR. So over a consistent range of output, the firms, the price takers, they're price takers. So this each additional unit they sell, they are selling at the same price. So if price is more than ATC, let's say $5 is more than, let's say the average total cost is, let's say $2. So there is an abnormal profit of $3 per unit multiplied by the quantity that you're selling, which is obviously the profit maximizing quantity based on MC equals to MR. So firm A is basically making an abnormal profit of how much? $1,000. That's the logic behind this. Okay. And over here, firm B is making a normal profit, economically break even at $0, zero economic profit. And this happens when your price is equal to your average total cost. So let's say that you're selling the product at, let's say, $5 and your average total cost is $5. So there's zero economic profit per unit, right? So firm B is making a normal profit, and both of them should continue in the short run. While now let's see, and that is actually the purpose of this video, that is about firm C, D, and E. Now, guys, remember that it is very much possible that in the short run, a firm in a perfectly competitive market makes losses. So we have 3 firms in our example, and all 3 firms here are making losses respectively of $200, $500, and $800 for me. Right? Now, before we see how these firms will decide whether they are supposed to continue the operations or whether they are supposed to shut down the operations, that is, they will, on basis of what will they decide? What is the factor that will force them to shut down, or what is that point where they will decide now it's better to shut down? So what are the factors they will consider while deciding to shut down or not? One thing we must know is that the amount of loss for firm CDNE, that is 200, 500 and 800, is at a particular quantity. Let's say, so for example, if we talk about firm C, the amount of loss of 200 will be at a particular quantity, right? And when you're saying that it will be at a particular quantity, so let's assume we say that ये जो 200 का loss आ रहा है, it's because it is when we are selling 5 units. So we know that firms basically apply the profit maximizing rule, because we studied that firms are profit maximizers, right? So in order to maximize profit, they apply the profit maximizing rule, that is MC equals to MR. But hang on a second, there's no profit here, it's in fact a loss. So that is exactly what I'm going to tell you right now, that for example, if the firm is making a loss of $200 at, let's say, by selling 5 units, so the quantity of 5 is the quantity at which MC equals to MR. So this 5 units is the point where MC equals to MR, right? So the MC equals to MR, remember that the profit maximizing rule, MC equals to MR, which gives the maximum possible profitable quantity. It is the profit maximizing quantity, right? But at the same time, if MC equals to MR is the maximum profit maximizing quantity, then it for a firm that is making profits, right? For a firm that is making profits, then for a firm that is incurring a loss, then for example, for that firm that is incurring a loss, when would a firm incur a loss? When the average total cost is more than price. When the price is, let's say, $5, while the average total cost is maybe $8. So there's a loss per unit of $3, economic loss. So what we're saying is that when the firm is incurring a loss where its average total cost is more than price, that is, the average total cost is cost per unit, where each unit has a higher average cost, where each unit is made at a higher average cost, it costs more to produce than to sell. So you're making a loss per unit, right? Economic loss per unit, right? Where or if you talk about in terms of total, where your total cost, economic total cost is more than your total revenue. So definitely you have an economic loss. So what we're saying guys over here is that the quantity where a firm equates MC with MR, right? It is at this, that if that quantity is the profit maximizing quantity for a firm that is maximizing its profits, then it's also the loss minimizing quantity for a firm that is making losses. So we could say that, firm C is making a loss of $200 by selling, let's say, 5 units. So 5 is basically the loss minimizing quantity. If the firm is selling 3 units, the loss will go up. If the firm sells 8 units, the loss will go up, right? So what we're saying is that 5 units that is being sold is the loss minimizing quantity as well. So the rule of MC equals to MR gives the profit maximizing quantity for firms that is making profits where your average total cost is below your price, right? Or your price is more than your average total cost. But MC equals to MR, that profit maximizing rule is also the loss minimizing rule as well. So the point or the quantity where MC equals MR, at that quantity where MC intersects MR from below, right? At that quantity, the firm would be minimizing its loss as well. Okay? So remember that. Okay? Any other quantity would definitely yield a bigger loss. So guys, coming back to the table, firm C, D, and E is incurring losses, right? Okay guys, so basically as far as the shutdown decision is concerned, we need to know what the shutdown decision is. But remember that shutdown decisions are made in the short run, not in the long run. In the long run, we make exit decisions, right? So shutdown decisions are made in the short run if firms are making economic losses, but in the long run, we make exit decisions. For example, let's say for a perfectly competitive firms that we are talking about, right? Now, what exactly do you mean by shutdown? Shutdown means that you're not producing any more units, you're suspending your production, you're walking away from trading, or you're shutting down your operations. However, when you're saying that you're shutting down your operations, this does not at any point means that you are exiting the industry, right? You might even continue your operations later on, maybe if the product's price goes up, or your revenues start rising and the selling price has now increased because of an increase in demand, and now you know that the price will exceed your average variable cost, so you might start production again. But when you're saying shutting down, it means that you are not producing any more units right now and you are suspending your operations. But it doesn't mean that you are winding up your capital, selling your business, and then pursuing some profit elsewhere. So remember that now the economic question arises is that for a firm that is making economic losses, right? Will it go out of business? Will it shut down or will it exit? What's going to happen? right? When you're saying here, will it go out of business, it means will it shut down, right? As we said, exit will happen in the long run. In the short run, we need to decide whether we need to shut down, suspend production, or what. So in the long run, certainly it will go out of business, which means that not only will it shut down, it will exit as well, because it will exit because owners will not obviously be incurring economic losses forever. You can't. The owners have invested capital, right? And they might leave the industry, and obviously they'll wind up their capital and they'll pursue profits elsewhere. So exit is a long term thing, it's a long term decision. But let's say in the short run, if you're having economic losses, the firm may shut down or the firm may not shut down. It actually depends, right? And it depends on what. The thing is that the decision to shut down or not, or to shut down your trading, is actually determined by comparing the total revenues and variable cost. So it's the variable cost that is actually considered when you want to decide whether you need to shut down or no. And you need to see that whether your revenues are enough that you're able to cover your variable cost or not, because variable cost is your relevant cost basically, because that is actually the cost of producing your goods. Because when you produce something, right, you incur raw material for it, right? So let's say if I'm producing a chair, I am purchasing raw material, I'm paying the labor, I'm paying electricity. So basically I'm incurring a variable cost on producing the chair, and that is your relevant cost for producing the chair. However, fixed cost, irrespective of whether I make the chair or not, is irrelevant for me. So that fixed cost will be incurred irrespective of whether I make the chair or not, right? So the decision is actually based on whether I need to. So the decision is based on whether my revenues are covering my variable cost or not. And there's more intuition and insight into this as the video will progress. You'll come to know that. Okay. But the thing is, if you look in what I've written over here, is that why and when is sustaining economic losses in the short run still worthwhile, right? So ऐसे लिख कर आएंगे, why is it worthwhile, right? It will only be it will actually be worthwhile to actually sustain those economic losses in the short run, but it's still actually worthwhile. And this will happen when your price is more than your average variable cost. Price means the selling price per unit is more than your variable cost per unit. And if this happens, then at the profit maximizing quantity, or you can say the loss minimizing quantity, your average variable cost is covered by revenues, which means in this case, the firm is better off staying in business, right? The firm is better off staying in business, in the sense that the firm should actually not shut down, right? It's better off staying in business in the sense that it should not shut down. Yeah. So in this case, basically my total revenues would actually be more than my total variable cost, right, at the loss minimizing quantity. So basically I'm able to cover my variable cost. But if my average variable cost is basically more than my price, right, that is variable cost per unit is more than what it's costing me more to produce in terms of only the variable cost rather than the price that I'm selling it for. So in this case, the total revenue the firm will earn will be less than the variable cost of production, right? So the firm should shut down operations, right? So now we're going to be seeing this through an example. So here it's the same table that I had previously drawn. We have three firms, firm C, D, and E. I've only taken C, D, and E because now we're talking about economic losses. So let's talk about the first case, firm C. We know that firm C is making an economic loss of $200, right? But if over here, the firm will continue in the short run. It will not shut down because, like I said, the rule is that if the total revenue is more than your total variable cost, the firm is covering its total variable cost, right? Because the revenues are 1800 while the variable cost is 1500, so it's making a positive contribution. Remember that contribution means that the producing the good, when you're considering the relevant cost, variable costs are your relevant cost basically. Fixed costs are irrelevant, means irrelevant in the sense of making any decision, because they have to be paid irrespective of whether you produce or not produce, right? So if you do not produce anything, you shut down right now, you'll still have to incur those fixed costs. So right now I'm only considering my variable costs because they are more relevant to me right now, because in order to produce the good, that is the cost that I have to incur, right? Fixed costs will be incurred irrespective of whether I produce or not, right? So The thing is that that over here, whenever my revenue is more than my variable cost, so there's a contribution, positive contribution to producing and selling that product, in the sense that I am earning something out of producing that product, and that contribution is actually to the fixed cost now, because here my contribution is 1800 minus 1500, that is 300. So I am earning a contribution of 300, and this contribution of 300 will actually be used by the business owner to pay the fixed cost of 500 now, right? And now the owner will only have to pay $200 of fixed cost from his own pocket. And here you can see that the loss is 200 as well, because out of that 500 fixed cost, 300 is basically the contribution that is used to cover that fixed cost, while 200 is paid from the owner's pockets. So there is a contribution, right? There's a positive contribution to your fixed cost. So that is why we're saying that for although firm C is making an economic loss of $200, but still it will continue to operate in the short run, because total revenue is more than variable cost, right? So the firm contributes positively towards fixed cost. We know that fixed costs are 500 and we are earning a positive contribution of 300, and that will be used to pay the fixed cost. But if firm C would have shut down, let's say agar band ho jati firm C, it would have shut down, then the whole of fixed cost of $500 would have to be incurred by the owner from his own pockets, right? So if the firm would have shut down, then what would be the revenue? Zero revenue hota, zero revenue. Variable cost incur hoti nahi, wo bhi incur nahi hoti, ye bhi zero hota, ye bhi zero hota. So straightforward हमें loss hota 500 का, because if fixed cost has to be paid. So if you're shutting down, there are no operations, then you still have to pay the fixed cost, right? Because obviously firms have incurred annual contracts of lease and rents, right? They have to lawfully bear with them, right? So if you have leased out your plant, I mean, if you have taken it on rent, so definitely you have to pay your fixed cost. So the thing is that if the firm would have shut down, the whole of fixed cost would have to be paid by the owner as loss. While now as only $200 have to be paid, because 300 is already contributed from the positive contributions that you're earning from producing and selling, right? So right now the business is actually making a loss of only 200. If it shuts down, there would be no revenue, no variable cost, but still there would be a loss, but that loss would be equal to 500, equal to the amount of fixed cost, right? Which would be greater than your existing loss of 200. So in the, however, हमने शॉर्ट रन में तो बोला कि शॉर्ट रन में कंटिन्यू दी ऑपरेशंस, लेकिन इस शॉर्ट रन में हम कह रहे हैं कंटिन्यू दी ऑपरेशंस बिकॉज यू एबल टू कवर द वेरिएबल कॉस्ट. इन द लॉन्ग रन यू विल शट डाउन एंड प्रॉब्ली एग्जिट द इंडस्ट्री एज वेल. You can't continue making these economic losses, irrespective of whether you're covering the variable cost or not. In the long run, you might shut down, close operations, even exit as well, and look for other profitable ventures, right? So एक और एग्जाम्पल ही हम देख लेते हैं. यहाँ पे मैंने एक और हाइपोथेटिकल एग्जाम्पल दिया. सो सी इन द लेटर ऑन वीडियोज इन मार्केट स्ट्रक्चर्स हम इसी के ग्राफ्स बनाएंगे. एंड this is a confusing topic because when the students are taught mostly in colleges and you generally see videos of it, generally students are taught through graphs, right? And देखें ग्राफ जो होता है ना वो कॉन्सेप्ट से निकल, डायग्राम कॉन्सेप्ट से बनता है, डायग्राम से कॉन्सेप्ट नहीं बनता, कॉन्सेप्ट से डायग्राम बनता है. तो जब हम कॉन्सेप्ट सीखते हैं तो डायग्राम खुद ही समझ आ जाता है ऑटोमेटिकली. वो डायग्राम हम मार्केट स्ट्रक्चर में देख लेंगे. So example 2, again a hypothetical example I have given. I've taken the prices, let's say $8, average total cost $9 DVA, that is divided between the average fixed and average variable cost of $2 and $7 respectively. The output is 100 units and the total revenue is obviously $800, that is 100 times the selling price of 8, and the total cost is $900, that is 100 units into 9. Now obviously I'm assuming कि ये जो 100 units हैं ये profit maximizing units हैं, या obviously profit maximizing rule के accordingly derive हुए हैं, where MC must be cutting MR at from its lowest, I mean from below basically, and so this then becomes a loss minimizing quantity. So loss minimizing quantity पे total loss कितना आ रहा है, negative $100 का आ रहा है. But इधर भी it does not mean that a firm will shut down, although it's an economic loss, right? Because if it shuts down, वैसे भी if it shuts down, still it will have to pay the fixed cost, right? Still उसको fixed cost pay करनी पड़ेगी. Right now उसको loss हो रहा है $100 का. If it shuts down, it still has to pay a fixed cost of $200 from its own pocket. But abhi the owner does not have to entirely pay $200 of the fixed cost as loss from his own pocket, because $100 is already contributed through a positive contribution because of producing and selling the product. ये जो revenues हैं ये इतने significant तो हैं कि वो variable cost of 900 को cover sorry, जो revenues हैं वो इतने significant हैं कि वो वेरिएबल कॉस्ट को कवर कर रहे हैं. तो इधर वेरिएबल कॉस्ट हमारी कितनी है? द वेरिएबल कॉस्ट इज 700. Our total revenue is 800, while the variable cost is 7 times 100, that is 700. So at least our revenue is exceeding the variable cost by 100. So 100 is that 100 that we are earning as surplus contribution, that is used to pay for the fixed cost of कितना of अपना fixed cost कितनी है? Fixed cost is 200. तो ये जो 100 पॉजिटिव कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन है दैट विल बी यूज टू पे द फिक्स कॉस्ट ऑफ $200. सो टेक्निकली दैट इज वाई वी ओनली एंड अप विद $100 का लॉस जो ओनर अपनी जेब से देगा. So if it continues to produce, it has losses of $100, but if it shuts down, it has a higher loss of equivalent to fixed cost of $200. So it will not shut down. So what इससे हमने क्या सीखा? What is the rule? इससे हमने what are we actually trying to learn or understand from here? What's the intuition? So the rule is, in short, you must know this, that if the price is more than your average variable cost, which also means total revenue exceeding total variable cost. If price per unit is more than average variable cost, because average variable cost is variable cost per unit, so it automatically means that total revenue would be more than total variable cost, at the loss minimizing quantity. So as long as average variable cost is covered by your revenue, the firm is better off. It's worthwhile staying in business. I mean, the firm should stay. Zaruri nahi hai every time we write firm should stay, firm should stay, firm should stay. Yeah, firm should not close. You should know better economic words, better terminologies. And one of the ways is to say it's actually worthwhile staying in business. Worthwhile staying in business here means not shutting down. That's what we are saying. Staying in the business का मतलब exiting the business से हम कंपेयर नहीं कर रहे हैं, हम शट डाउन से कंपेयर कर रहे हैं. स्टेइंग इन बिजनेस मीन्स नॉट शटिंग डाउन ऑपरेशंस ओवर हियर, जहाँ पे मैंने ये लिखा है. स्टेइंग इन बिजनेस मीन्स नॉट शटिंग डाउन ऑपरेशंस फॉर दिस perspective, not shutting down, right? So yeah, so the firm is better off not shutting down, or it's worthwhile to stay and continue your operations, right? So now we'll look at another example, which would be of firm D. Okay guys, so now if we look at the example for firm D, it's the same example that I've extracted from the above table. So firm D is basically earning an economic loss of $500. We can see that the total cost is $2,000 and the total revenue is $1,500, right? It's less, the cost exceeds your revenue. So there's a loss of $500, and now we need to decide whether we should shut down or not. Now, in order to decide we should shut down or not, we'll need to see that whether operating is beneficial or continuing production is beneficial or shutting down is beneficial, right? So let's say what would happen if the business shuts down. So let's say if the business shuts down, then the total revenue would be zero and your variable cost would be zero as well. So the only cost that the owner would need to pay is the $500 of fixed cost, because that still needs to be paid, right? So in this case, if the business shuts down, it needs to incur, in this case, if the business shuts down, let's say shuts down, so the profit of the business would be equal to the negative fixed cost, which is your profit would be which is negative fixed cost in the sense that the loss would be negative 500, right? Which is actually equal. So profit is negative fixed cost, meaning that simply it's the profit would be equal to negative 500, means it's a loss. If negative profit means a loss, right? So you see, the thing is that, and so this is what is going to happen if the business shuts down. And let's see what would happen if the business continues the operations. So if the business continues operations, in this case, the loss is also 500. So, sort of the owner is indifferent, because he's like, oh, you know what, shutting down will give me a loss of 500, while continuing the business will also give me a loss of 500. So shutting down is not, over here, if we see in this example, shutting down, we can't say that shutting down is better than operating the business. Neither can we say that operating the business is better than shutting down in certain context, in the context that, although it might seem better in a certain context, and I'll come to that, but operating also doesn't seems at least better than shutting down if you look in the context of the profits and losses, because shutting down is resulting also a loss of 500, while operating is also resulting in a loss of 500. But the good thing is that, like I said, in certain context, operating doesn't seems beneficial, but in certain contexts it does. And the thing is that you can see that that at least the revenues are actually equal to your variable cost. So whatever you're earning in terms of your sales revenue by selling, you're actually covering all your variable costs. So at least you're not getting any contribution, because contribution is revenue minus variable cost. Contribution का मतलब होता है कि आपका जो revenue है वो variable cost से कितना ज़्यादा है, as in how much, because variable cost is the cost of actually producing the product. It's the relevant cost that is actually incurred in producing something. Because fixed cost तो वैसे भी incur होती ही है, right? Irrespective of whether you produce it or not. So the actual cost which is relevant to producing is your variable cost. So contribution is how much more revenues are you earning, which exceed your variable cost of production. And the positive contribution is actually going to contribute to the payment of your fixed cost. And we also already studied that in the first and the second case. I explained that to you as well. So guys, the thing is that your revenues are actually equal to your variable cost, although there's no positive contribution, right? So you see what I've written here is कि जो हमारे revenues हैं, they're actually equal to your variable cost, meaning that revenues earned are just enough, सिर्फ इतने ही हैं to cover the variable cost, just enough to cover the variable cost, giving a loss of 500 का loss आ रहा है, which is actually equal to the fixed cost, right? So there is zero contribution basically towards your fixed cost from the revenue. So your revenues are not contributing anything to your fixed cost. Which actually means that all the fixed costs will be paid by the owner himself from his own pocket, and the revenues are not contributing towards the payment of the fixed cost, because the revenue is just enough to just cover all the variable cost. So in such a situation, जब भी एक ऐसी situation सामने आएगी, so the firm operates at the shutdown point. This is the shutdown point. Shutdown point अभी बात करते हैं इस पे. So in such a situation, we say that firm is operating at the shutdown point and is indifferent. देखिए मैंने क्या लिखा है, and is indifferent between continuing and shutting down in the short run, right? लेकिन लॉन्ग रन में तो बहुत स्ट्रेट है. इन द लॉन्ग रन, इफ दिस बिजनेस इज इनकरिंग एन इकोनॉमिक लॉस, लॉन्ग रन में जब भी इकोनॉमिक लॉस होगा, इकोनॉमिक लॉस कब होता है? व्हेन योर प्राइस इज लेस देन योर एवरेज टोटल कॉस्ट. सो देयर वुड बी एन इकोनॉमिक लॉस पर यूनिट टाइम्स the number of units you will sell times the number of units that you will sell, which will be determined by the profit maximizing rule MC equals to MR. अब वो कैसे होगा वो हम मार्केट स्ट्रक्चर्स में ग्राफ्स में देखेंगे. वी सी दैट इन द ग्राफ्स, नॉट राइट नाउ, वी जस्ट सी द कॉन्सेप्ट राइट नाउ. So long run में क्या होता है? Obviously the long run में definitely the business will shut down, and in fact exit as well, because if it's not able to cover, if there's an economic loss in the long run, this business is not worthwhile to continue, right? But right now the business is indifferent, right, between continuing and shutting down. So you see, because shutting down से भी loss है 500 का, continuing से भी loss है 500 का, और if the business shuts down, still the owner has to pay all the fixed cost from his own pocket, right? Abhi bhi the loss is actually equal to the fixed cost. So the owner is indifferent between continuing and shutting down. So isko shutdown point कहते हैं. Shutdown point is basically a situation. Remember this. Shutdown point of a firm is a situation where we are actually saying that ये जो पूरा आउटपुट निकला है, और इस जितना MC equals to MR से जो आउटपुट निकला है, and whatever output we have sold, and the revenues that are being generated and the cost that has been incurred, the firm has made a revenue. The firm has made just enough revenues to only cover all its variable cost with zero contribution. So this is a shutdown situation. This is basically known as the shutdown point. So shutdown point is the point where your revenues are exactly equal to your variable cost. अब revenue is exactly equal to your, अब revenue equaling your variable cost means ये total है ना. Revenue means total. But what is the formula for revenue? The formula for revenue is price times quantity, right? It's price times quantity. So total revenue means price times quantity. Which quantity? The quantity that comes from the MC equals to MR rule, right? And in this case, obviously, we're not making any profits. We're actually making a loss. So the profit maximizing quantity via MC equals to MR is also the loss minimizing quantity via MC equals to MR, राइट. सो ये क्यू जो होगी लॉस मिनिमाइजिंग क्वांटिटी होगी. इसकी एक्सप्लेनेशन मैंने आपको अपने फर्म सी में भी दी थी. एंड जब हम मार्केट स्ट्रक्चर्स में डायग्राम्स करेंगे तो डायग्राम्स में इसमें और क्लैरिटी आएगी भी, तभी तो हम इसका कॉन्सेप्ट समझ रहे हैं. वहाँ और डेप्थ में वी विल टॉक अबाउट दिस थ्रू द एक्चुअली द डायग्राम्स. So the total variable cost is basically average variable cost times quantity. So what we see from this formula is that if price equals to average variable cost, right? If price is actually equal to your average variable cost, because this actually means that price equals to your average variable cost. If price per unit is equal to your variable cost per unit, it means that there is per unit zero contribution. Whatever variable costs you are incurring per unit, you're actually recovering it. All the variable costs you're recovering it from the output from the unit that you're selling, but you're not gaining any extra by selling that. There's no positive contribution towards fixed cost, right? So in this is a shutdown point. अब shutdown point हम इसको इसलिए बोल रहे हैं क्योंकि अभी let's say the average variable cost is let's say $5 while the price is $5 as well, hypothetically speaking, for so price equals to average variable cost है अगर, so ये shutdown point है आपका. So guys, remember that whenever the price will be equal to average variable cost, it is your shutdown point, because अब price इससे कम हुई, let's say the demand goes down, right? If the demand goes down, then the market price will go down, and since perfectly competitive firms are price takers, they're going to take the new market price. Individual firms will take the new market price and they'll start selling at let's say $3. So now the price has become lower than your average variable cost. So this means that the firm will shut down immediately. So shutdown point एक ऐसा point है कि इससे नीचे price अब जाएगी. The price slight decrease in price from the price right now will result in an immediate shutdown, because we have reached that point. We have reached that minimum point where we will not take it anymore, and a minor reduction in price would mean that we will not be able to cover our variable cost per unit, because price would be less than variable cost per average variable cost. So if price would be less than average variable cost, we will shut down. So shutdown की condition क्या है? That price has to be less than average variable cost, then we will shut down in the short run. Okay. So, and if price is less than average total cost, it simply means that price being less than average cost, average total cost or average cost same thing. So इस केस में क्या हो रहा होता है? Total revenues are less than total cost, तभी हमें 500 का loss आ रहा है. 500 का loss इसलिए आ रहा है because total revenue is less than total cost. But total revenue and total cost is in total terms, right? Because we have multiplied the price by the quantity and we've gotten the total revenue, and we've multiplied the average cost with the quantity being the loss minimizing quantity, and we've got total cost. राइट तो हमें 500 का लॉस आ रहा है बेसिकली इस केस के अंदर, राइट. बट पॉइंट इज कि देखें, लाइक आई सेड कि शट डाउन पॉइंट एक ऐसा पॉइंट है वेयर टोटल रेवेन्यूज दैट वी आर अर्निंग इज एक्जैक्टली इक्वल टू टोटल वेरिएबल कॉस्ट. सो देयर इज नो पॉजिटिव कंट्रीब्यूशन. एनी फॉल इन रेवेन्यू बिलो दिस लेवल, रेवेन्यू क्यों फॉल होगा बिलो दिस लेवल? बिकॉज फर्म्स तो प्राइस टेकर्स हैं, राइट. When the selling price, because when the price line goes down, that would go down because of a fall in demand. And graphically, we'll see that in perfectly competitive in market structures. But just know the concept right now that if subsequently the price goes down and the price falls below average variable cost, at least for this video, you can write this rule down. Because वहाँ पे जब हम diagrams कर रहे होंगे ना market structures में, जो कि हम start करने वाले हैं next video से, so उस वक्त आपको बहुत ज़बरदस्त समझ आएगा, बिकॉज यहाँ पे कॉन्सेप्चुअली आप अंडरस्टैंड कर रहे हो. जनरली स्टूडेंट्स डायग्राम से पढ़ रहे होते हैं तो उनको इतनी क्लैरिटी नहीं आ रही होती, समझ नहीं आता हम क्यों पढ़ रहे हैं. दे डोंट अंडरस्टैंड द रीजन वाई दे आर स्टडिंग दैट. दिस इज द रीजन वाई यू आर स्टडिंग दैट आई एम एक्सप्लेनिंग इन दिस वीडियो. बिकॉज लाइक आई सेड, कॉन्सेप्ट से डायग्राम बनता है, डायग्राम से कॉन्सेप्ट नहीं निकलता. सो एनी फॉल इन रेवेन्यू बिलो दिस लेवल, कौन सा लेवल? द लेवल एट विच दे बोथ आर इक्वल, टी आर इक्वल टू टी वी सी, विल कॉज अ प्रॉफिट मैक्सिमाइजिंग फर्म और अ लॉस मिनिमाइजिंग फर्म टू शट डाउन इमीडिएटली. ठीक है जी, टू शट डाउन इमीडिएटली. सो द रूल इज दैट प्राइस शुड नॉट बी लेस देन योर एवरेज वेरिएबल. इफ इट इज लेस देन फर्म विल शट डाउन. देखिए बात ये कि यहाँ पे तो टोटल रेवेन्यू टोटल कॉस्ट के बराबर है, सॉरी टोटल रेवेन्यू टोटल वेरिएबल कॉस्ट के बराबर है, तो ओनर इनडिफरेंट है. सही है, बिकॉज रेवेन्यूज जो है वो वेरिएबल कॉस्ट टोटल वेरिएबल कॉस्ट को कवर कर रहे हैं. इफ द फर्म शट्स डाउन, सो देयर वुड बी अ लॉस इक्वल टू योर फिक्स कॉस्ट. इफ यू डू नॉट शट डाउन, स्टिल देयर इज अ लॉस इक्वल टू योर फिक्स कॉस्ट, बिकॉज टोटल रेवेन्यू तो सिर्फ वेरिएबल कॉस्ट को कवर कर रहा है ना, तो फिक्स कॉस्ट तो अभी भी इनकर हो रही है. तो चाहे शट डाउन करूँ या नहीं करूँ, फिक्स कॉस्ट तो इनकर हो रही है. तो इसका मतलब जो लॉस आ रहा है वो द लॉस इज इक्वल टू नेगेटिव फिक्स कॉस्ट विच इज़ योर. सही है. सो ओनर इनडिफरेंट है. लेकिन प्रैक्टिकली क्या होता है, इफ दिस इज ट्रू, मैंने क्या लिखा है इसको सुन लें. इफ दिस इज ट्रू, देन फर्म्स इन द रियल वर्ल्ड which are who are operating at the shutdown point. So if firms are operating at the shutdown point, which means that if they are operating at the shutdown point, means that at the loss minimizing quantity, assuming कि देखें यहाँ तो हम यही assume कर रहे हैं ना कि हमें loss हो रहा है $500 का, so which is the loss minimizing quantity which comes through MC equals to MR. So if the firms are operating at the shutdown point, which means कि वो जो quantity produce कर रहे होंगे, जिस quantity में MC equals to MR हो रहा होगा, वो उनकी loss minimizing quantity होगी. So उस quantity के ऊपर, let's say there could be 10 units, the total revenue would be equal to total variable cost. So there's zero contribution. So there's a loss equivalent to fixed cost. So this is the shutdown point. The point where TR equals to TVC at the loss minimizing quantity is the shutdown point. So if this is true in the real world, right, then firms who are operating at the shutdown point might continue production. वो शायद बंद ना करें. They will still continue production because obviously they have loyal clients. They need to serve the clients. Plus they might have thousands of employees working under them. उनकी incomes at stake होंगी. So इस situation के अंदर probably they will try to pull it off and they will try to continue and not shut down probably. But if this continues in the long run, and in the long run, let's say इकोनॉमिक लॉसेज हो रहे हैं, इन द लॉन्ग रन अगर इकोनॉमिक लॉसेज हो रहे होंगे तो दे विल शट डाउन एंड एग्जिट. ठीक है जी. Probably they will end up continuing in the short run and not shut down, even though your price is exactly equal to your average variable cost and your total revenue is exactly equal to total variable cost. They might not shut down for just reasons that I have mentioned. They need to satisfy the customers who are loyal to them and etc. and etc. Okay guys, so this is or they might have a large workforce. So guys, I hope you understood what the shutdown point is, and now there is one more example of Fermi that I need to give you before we are going to close this video. So guys, coming to Fermi, you can see that Fermi is representing a situation where it's incurring a loss of $800 and the revenue is $1,200 while the total cost is $2,000, right? So there's a economic loss of $800. Now the thing is that if you look, should this firm shut down or not in the short run, it should definitely cease production and shut down. And the reason being is over here, although it's incurring a loss, but at the same time the revenue is not covering its variable cost, so there's a negative contribution. So in that case it should shut down. Why? Because if we need to decide whether we have to shut down or not in the short run, we need to see whether shutting down is beneficial or continuing is beneficial. Shutting down is beneficial means shutting down में लॉस कम होगा या कंटिन्यूएशन में लॉस को. देखिए लॉस तो हो रहा है ना, अभी तो लॉस हो रहा है, तो अब शट डाउन करेंगे, would that result into a bigger loss, or continuing would result into, or not shutting down would result in a bigger loss. So in this case, if right now they are continuing, if they continue, they are incurring a loss of 800. But if they shut down, then there would be zero revenue. So if they shut down, no revenue will be earned, no variable cost would be incurred, right? And so the only loss that they will face is the fixed cost that they will need to pay. So that would be the only loss, right? So over here right now, if they continue production, the loss is equal to 800, which means the profit is negative 800. This if they continue production. If they shut down production, in that case the profit would be equal to negative 500. That is, profit would be negative fixed cost, which simply means there would be a loss, right? So the loss right now is bigger than the loss that would happen if they shut down. So shutting down is beneficial for the business. It's worthwhile for the business shutting down, because producing it, they are earning a negative contribution. देखिए, Fermi is incurring a loss of 800, जो मैंने यहाँ पे बात लिखी है. I told you कि they should shut down and cease business activity immediately because contribution negative है ना. Total revenue is less than variable cost. Since contribution towards fixed cost is negative, ठीक है जी, negative contribution है towards fixed cost, तो business को close करना is better, shut down करना is better basically, I mean. So यानी seizing production is better. ठीक है जी, एग्जिट तो अभी हम कर नहीं सकते ना, शॉर्ट रन में तो एग्जिट नहीं होता, राइट? तो शटिंग डाउन मीन सीजिंग प्रोडक्शन इज बेटर. व्हाई? The simple reason is that contribution is negative. देखें, you need to understand what negative so in your exam just don't say, because exam के अंदर आप equilibriums के concepts जब समझा रहे होंगे in market structures, we'll see that in our coming videos now. So if you're discussing a situation of a shutdown, questions in the past have come multiple times regarding shutdowns, and we'll see those questions as well. So if you're talking about shutdowns, right, and you're saying that there's a negative contribution, then explain what a negative contribution means. Again, negative contribution का मतलब होता है कि total revenue is less than variable cost. लेकिन ये तो formula है, you haven't really explained what it means. इसका मतलब ये होता है कि जब आपका contribution negative होता है, so it means that firm को loss जो हो रहा है ना, वो क्या हो रहा है? The firm also needs to pay the fixed cost. फिक्स कॉस्ट तो पे करनी है फर्म को, प्लस साथ साथ उसकी वेरिएबल कॉस्ट भी पूरी नहीं हो रही ना, तो उसका जो लॉस है वो खाली फिक्स कॉस्ट के बराबर नहीं है. ये जो 800 का लॉस है, दिस इज डिवाइडेड इनटू द फिक्स कॉस्ट दैट इट हैज़ टू पे बिकॉज द रेवेन्यूज आर नॉट कवरिंग द फिक्स कॉस्ट, प्लस पार्ट ऑफ द वेरिएबल कॉस्ट दैट इट हैज़ टू पे एज वेल. 500 की फिक्स कॉस्ट पे नहीं, रेवेन्यू कवर नहीं कर रहा, प्लस वेरिएबल कॉस्ट जो है वो कितनी कवर हो रही है, 1200 का रेवेन्यू 1500 की वेरिएबल कॉस्ट को कवर पूरा कर ही नहीं पाएगा, तो 300 की वेरिएबल कॉस्ट द ओनर नीड्स टू पे फ्रॉम हिज पॉकेट एज वेल. तो नेगेटिव कंट्रीब्यूशन का मतलब ये है कि फिक्स के लॉस जो है वो फिक्स कॉस्ट के बराबर भी, और साथ साथ जेब से वेरिएबल कॉस्ट भी पे करनी है हमको. सो देयर इज अ नेगेटिव इकोनॉमिक लॉस इन टोटल ऑफ 800. सो फिक्स कॉस्ट की तरफ कोई कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन नहीं है हमारा. इनफैक्ट फिक्स कॉस्ट के साथ साथ वेरिएबल कॉस्ट भी अब पे करनी पड़ेगी हमें अपनी जेब से. So the shutdown rule is if price is less than average variable cost, which means that if total revenue is less than total variable cost, and we can see that the revenue is 1200 while the variable cost is 1500. So it costs the product to produce 1500, which is the relevant cost, while the revenue is only 1200. So there's a negative 300 contribution. So अगर हम shut down कर जाते हैं, so if we shut down, we will incur a loss of only 500. while if we continue the operations we will incur a loss of 800. So shutting down is better. तो ये दो तरीकों से समझाना है. One way you need to explain it is that you need to say that shutting down is better because the loss will be less and only equal to 500, while right now the loss is 800 if we continue. Then the second reasoning that you need to give is that there's a negative contribution, right? And the profit max, the shutdown rule says, you need to mention the shutdown rule, that if price is less than average variable cost and the total, which means the total revenue is less than total variable cost, then the firm will shut down. It needs to shut down, right? It's better to shut down. So if it shuts down, it will incur a loss of only 500, which will be equal to its fixed cost on right? So hence by shutting down, the firm is better off. ये लिखना सही है, since losses would decrease to 500 from 800. So remember the rule is whenever price is less than average variable cost and whenever total revenue is less than total variable cost, the firm should shut down. Okay, so this was the entire concept of shutdown, and now we will see in the videos, basically in the market structures, when you will studying the graphs, graphs में हम किस तरह, how will we represent economic profits, losses and shutdowns and all of that. So a lot more is coming in the coming videos, which is very, very interesting. And you know, honestly, since we have covered a lot of this chapter thoroughly, theory of supply, और हमने कॉन्सेप्चुअली इसको इतना कवर किया है कि आपके फंडामेंटल्स जो हैं बाय द एंड ऑफ दिस चैप्टर शुड बी वेरी वेरी स्ट्रॉन्ग. Ideally they will be very strong. So when I will be doing market structures now, you will find it very easy. Why? Because theory of supply में हमने बहुत डिटेल में we have covered costs, we have covered revenue, we have covered profits. So fundamental 101 for required for market structures has been significantly covered and your base has been made. So now once we move towards market structures, you will find it very very easy. ठीक है. Now before we end this video, last thing is that we need to cover about क्या कहते हैं, what happens in the long run. तो ये तो हमने short run cover किया है ना अभी, कि short run के अंदर whether the firm should shut down or not, right? But what happens if situations arises in the long run? So what is the exit rule of when should the firm exit in the long run? तो वो जल्दी से देख लेते हैं, then I'll end the video. Okay guys, now moving on to the long run, and let's see how firms will decide and what will they decide, whether they need to exit or they need to enter the industry. But let's see what is the criteria on the basis of which the firms will judge. So for example, first of all, we know that in the long run, the firms will make entry and exit decisions in the industry, right? Because firms are free to enter and exit, and they can free to enter and exit. This is also a whole concept. So it's not that, and this is also one of the characteristics of a perfectly competitive firm, that there is free entry and exit. But a lot of times students don't even know what free entry and exit means. Now it is not the topic or the content that for this video. Probably you need to wait till we move on to perfect competition, and we are in fact moving on to perfect competition in the next video, since you are starting market structure. So वहाँ पे मैं आपको समझाऊंगा about the concept of free entry and exit as well, right? So remember that in the long run, the firms make entry and exit decisions, right? In the short run, they will make whether they have to continue or they have to shut down decisions if there is an economic loss, right? But in the long run, decisions would be like, if there is abnormal profit, it will signal firms to enter. If there is economic losses, they will exit, right? अच्छा, दूसरी चीज़ ये कि, like I said, in the long run, the existence of either profits and losses will signal, losses and profits signal करेगा to the owners of the capital within the industry, outside the industry as well, to enter or exit. Also remember that in the long run, there is no fixed cost. We have already covered this concept in the cost videos कि long run में fixed cost नहीं होती. Whatever the cost is, it is a variable cost. So the total cost is obviously equal to the variable cost, since there is no fixed cost, right? So profit का formula होता है total revenue minus total cost. So total revenue minus total cost in the long run could also be written as profit equals to total revenue minus total cost. So whatever the value of this answer would exactly be equal to the value of this answer, because the total cost would only be the total variable cost. Also remember that if the firm shuts down in the long run, shutting down in the long run means it shuts down and exits basically. So उसको revenue zero हो रहा होगा because it has closed, right? But it will incur no cost either, क्योंकि fixed cost होगी नहीं long run के अंदर. So it's not that it has to pay the fixed rent and the fixed cost that it had to pay in the short run, right? So you need to first know this concept. इसीलिए क्योंकि fixed cost नहीं होती involved, तो firms को दिमाग mentally ये tension भी नहीं होती. They don't need to think whether they need to shut down or not. देखिए short run के अंदर the reason why we need to decide whether we should shut down or not is because हम ये equate कर रहे होते हैं that अगर हम shut down कर देंगे तो fixed cost तो देनी ही पड़ेगी, ठीक है? तो हमें fixed cost देनी पड़ेगी. So हम ये equate कर रहे होते हैं कि if we shut down, is it beneficial to shut down or is it beneficial to operate, right? So सो उसमें हम ये डिसाइड कर रहे होते हैं कि ऑपरेटिंग से जो लॉस आ रहा है, इज़ इट लेस देन द लॉस दैट वी नीड टू शट, इज़ इट लेस देन द लॉस दैट विल बी इनकर्ड इफ़ वी शट डाउन. जैसे हमने केस, we discussed this in case C as well, that in case C the loss was 200, लेकिन शट डाउन होने से लॉस आता 500, राइट? बिकॉज शट डाउन से रेवेन्यू और वेरिएबल कॉस्ट जीरो हो जाती, सो द ओनली लॉस वुड बी द फिक्स कॉस्ट दैट वी हैड टू पे. सही है? सो दैट इज़ वाई we need to decide over there in the short run, because we have to pay the fixed cost. So we need to decide whether the economic loss that is incurred right now is less than the loss that would be incurred after shutting down, and that loss would be equivalent to the fixed cost. But in the long run there is no fixed cost, right? So यहाँ पे जो ये चीज़ लिखी है मैंने, वो इसीलिए लिखी है कि if the firm shuts down in the long run, it will earn no revenue, but it will incur no cost either, right? तो क्योंकि फिक्स कॉस्ट नहीं देनी है फर्म को, it does not have to pay any fixed cost, so it will just see whether it has to exit the industry or not, right? Because exiting, उसमें there's no fixed cost ना. तो अगर मुझे अपने operations बंद करके I have to leave and pack up, then I'll do that, because I don't have to continue my operations, and because I don't have to continue paying my fixed cost, even though I have shut it down, or if I have shut down basically, right? So quick small things here, nothing complicated. We know that profit is equals to total revenue minus total cost. अगर profit की value zero है, economic profit होता है, not absolute accounting profit. This we are concerned about the economic profit. So if the economic profit is zero, since total cost is embedding the factoring in the implicit cost as well, so zero economic profit means normal profit, right? So अगर normal profit हो रहा है, so the firm should continue operations. It should not exit, right? It should not close, shut down, neither exit. प्रॉफिट इज ग्रेटर देन जीरो मीन्स एबनॉर्मल प्रॉफिट हो रहा होगा, डेफिनेटली सुपर नॉर्मल प्रॉफिट्स हो रहे होंगे, फर्म शुड कंटिन्यू. सो नॉर्मल प्रॉफिट हो रहा है या एबनॉर्मल प्रॉफिट हो रहा है, फर्म शुड कंटिन्यू, राइट? सो नॉर्मल प्रॉफिट और एबनॉर्मल प्रॉफिट का मतलब क्या होता है? अगर नॉर्मल प्रॉफिट हो रहा हो या एबनॉर्मल प्रॉफिट हो रहा हो, सो इस केस में फर्म्स को कंटिन्यू करना चाहिए. सो वेदर द फर्म शुड स्टे इन द इंडस्ट्री और वेदर द फर्म शुड exit basically depends on the fact that whether they are gaining a profit or not. If there is an economic profit, be it normal profit or be it supernormal profit, in both the cases they must continue, they must not exit in the long run. ये कब होगा? When your total revenue is greater than or equal to total cost. If the total revenue is equal to total cost, there is a normal profit, right? That is as in zero economic profit. But total revenue exceeds total cost, there is abnormal profit. ये तो totals में बात हो गई. अगर हम इसको per unit देखें, so if the price, which is also the average revenue, since they both are the same, if P is greater than or equal to average cost means over here average cost is your long run average cost, LRAC. AC यहाँ पे LRAC है. So if price is greater than or equal to your average cost, in that case the firm must continue, right? Greater than average cost means you will have a supernormal abnormal profit, while if it's equal to average cost, then you'll have a normal profit. In both cases the firm must continue, it should not exit. The firm should shut down and exit if price, that is average revenue, is less than your average cost, right? In this case the firm makes economic losses or subnormal profit, economic losses hote hain, we've already seen that. So guys, simple stuff. Continuing business in the long run, if you want to continue business in the long run, it requires the condition that sales revenue should be equal to your total cost, at least minimum जो revenue होना चाहिए ना, वो आपकी total cost को cover कर रहा हो, तो आप normal profits बना रहे हो. If you are making normal profits in the long run, you should stay in the industry. That is why you will study in perfectly competitive firms in the long run. That is, I'm sure that a lot of students have already studied this in their respective colleges, that in the long run equilibrium of a perfectly competitive firm market shows normal profits. And you'll be like, why the hell are they in the industry if they're making normal profits? Two errors that students make. एक तो उनको normal profit का concept नहीं पता होता. वो समझते थे कि normal profit का मतलब होता है profit, it means that the firm is making नो अकाउंटिंग प्रॉफिट, जो कि गलत है. नॉर्मल प्रॉफिट के अंदर एब्सोल्यूट प्रॉफिट हो रहा होता है, अकाउंटिंग प्रॉफिट हो रहा होता है. तो ये कॉन्सेप्ट भी उनका गलत था वहाँ पे, राइट? तो ये क्लैरिफाई हो गया होगा वीडियो देख के मेरी. दूसरा उनका कॉन्सेप्ट ये होता है कि आपको मैं बता चुका हूँ कि भाई एग्जिटिंग लॉन्ग रन में होगी जब नॉर्मल प्रॉफिट से कम बना रहे होंगे आप, व्हेन योर रेवेन्यूज आर लेस देन योर टोटल कॉस्ट और योर प्राइस इज लेस देन योर एवरेज, योर AR इज लेस देन योर एवरेज कॉस्ट, राइट? ठीक है जी. सो इन द लॉन्ग रन एंड वाई डू परफेक्टली कंपेरेटिव फर्म्स एंटर मेक नॉर्मल प्रॉफिट इन लॉन्ग रन, वो पूरी इकोनॉमिक फिलोसफी उसकी ज़बरदस्त आने वाली है मार्केट स्ट्रक्चर्स के अंदर. जितना कॉम्प्रहेंसिवली हमने यूटिलिटी थ्योरी, इंडिफरेंस कर्व एनालिसिस किया है, आई एम 100% श्योर दैट कोई क्वेश्चन आ जाए आपके सामने इंडिफरेंस एनालिसिस पे, यू विल बी 10 times better than all the students who have not studied that topic in detail. Same goes for theory of the firms, right? You conceptually you will be 10 times better than the rest, right? Because we have covered everything in super detail, right? So coming back to our discussion, that if that the same way, the same depth you will witness in my market structures videos as well, the same level of depth. And market structure is a very compulsory topic. It is going to come in your exam. It will come in your exam. I'm 100% telling you it will come in your exam in micro, right? So like in our above example, जैसे कि firm A और firm B की हम बात कर रहे थे, firm A and firm B should operate in the long run because they were making normal profits and abnormal. So firm A was making an abnormal profit coming back. Firm A was making an abnormal profit of $1,000 while firm B was only making a normal profit. There was an economic break even basically, right? So they should, firm A and firm B should continue in the long run. They should not exit. Continuation को किससे कंपेयर किया जा रहा है? Exit से कंपेयर किया जा रहा है. So ये shut down, exit से पहले shut down होगा फिर exit हो जाएगा. So we're saying they should, so we are comparing it with our exit thing. And obviously exit involves a shutdown as well, right? So closing operations exiting से compare हो रहा है. So to summarize, अगर मैं इसकी पूरी summary बनाऊँ before I end the video, to summarize the concept is that in the short run अगर हम बात करें, so in the short run if firms are making abnormal profits, if firms will make abnormal profits. So if the firms are making abnormal profits, total revenue more than total cost, which happens when price is more than your average cost. So definitely average cost as in your total average cost, as in this short term में तो fixed cost होती है ना, so this includes average fixed cost and average variable cost, so ये दोनों included है इसमें. But anyways, so the point is कि अगर abnormal profits होने, obviously you will continue production. If there's a normal profit in the short run, obviously you will continue production in both cases. नॉर्मल एबनॉर्मल प्रॉफिट में तो कोई सवाल ही पैदा नहीं होता कि शट डाउन क्यों करना है. शट डाउन जब एबनॉर्मल प्रॉफिट हो रहा है और नॉर्मल प्रॉफिट हो रहा है, तो शट डाउन तो शॉर्ट रन में सवाल ही पैदा नहीं होता. ठीक है जी. हाँ, सवाल पैदा ये क्वेश्चन, द क्वेश्चन अराइजेज when you have economic losses. That is when the question arises in the short run. So if you have economic losses, this happens when price is less than average total cost. Whenever price is less than average total cost, you have an economic loss because total revenue is less than total cost. So if you have an economic loss, then you need to decide whether you need to shut down or not. So either you will shut down, either you will not shut down. You will continue and do not shut down. You will continue and not shut down if total revenue falls below total cost, यानी total revenue total cost से कम हो लेकिन variable cost से ज़्यादा हो. यानी कि your revenues are less than total cost but more than variable cost. For example, look at firm C. Firm C में total revenue is less than total cost, 1800 is less than total cost of 2000 but more than variable cost of 1500. So if your revenue is covering variable cost, you should not shut down. ठीक है, यही चीज़ यहाँ एक्सप्लेन हुई है. तो ये तो टोटल से बात होगी. अगर हम पर यूनिट बात करें, so it means that price is more than average variable cost. That is, average variable cost is less than price. The price is covering your average variable cost per unit. But price is less than your average cost. So if price is less than average cost, but price is more than average variable cost. Price is less than average cost, that is the total cost per unit, but the price is more than variable cost per unit. Price is less than average cost means price is less than average cost per unit means, which includes your fixed cost as well. It means that your price is less than your per unit cost that is being incurred, right? So it's not covering your total per unit cost, but at least it's covering your per unit variable cost. तो ये कब होगा? तो जब ऐसा होगा तो total revenue will be below total cost, ठीक है, but more than variable cost. But you should immediately shut down if your total revenue is less than variable cost. Total revenue less than variable cost means price less than average variable cost. So remember that average variable cost वो minimum acceptable price है. Average variable cost की value, if average variable cost let's say is $5, if AVC is $5, then P should at least be equal to $5 if the firm has to continue in the short run. Even if the firm is making economic losses, but if P equals to ABC, then it will continue production, it will not shut down. So average variable cost ही वो minimum acceptable price है to continue business in the short run. ये तो हो गई शॉर्ट रन की बात. और लॉन्ग रन के अंदर एवरेज कॉस्ट इज द मिनिमम एक्सेप्टेबल प्राइस टू कंटिन्यू बिजनेस इन द लॉन्ग रन. सो लॉन्ग रन में अगर बिजनेस कंटिन्यू करना है और एग्जिट नहीं कर लेना इंडस्ट्री से, सो द प्राइस शुड बी इक्वल टू योर एवरेज कॉस्ट. इन दिस केस यू विल बी मेकिंग नॉर्मल profits. Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. So in the next class, that is in the coming videos that I'm going to upload on Google Classroom, we are starting with market structures. So the next video that will be uploaded in Google Classroom will be on market structures. So I hope you enjoyed the theory of supply with me, and we are now proceeding to market structures.